Once again, thank you everyone for joining the discussion today. I'm Adil. I'm a senior delivery associate here at Octave, and I'll be your moderator for today's panel discussion. Before we jump into introducing each of the panelists, just a quick overview of what we do here at Octave. So, over the past 5 years here at Octave, we've been driving the analytics transformation program for the John Hughes Group, which means that we've been delivering advanced analytics use cases across 7 industry verticals. And now, over the last couple of years, that includes also use cases touching on generative AI, which is our topic for today. And I am really excited to have 3 of my colleagues that I have the pleasure of working with who are experts in the field. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Charaka. So Charaka is our machine learning consultant here at Octave, and he works across consulting for different teams across those various industry verticals, across the different use cases we have on machine learning and Gen AI. Second, Manisha, who I have the pleasure of working very close with on a lot of use cases. She's a data scientist here at Octave, also specializing in both the leisure and retail work streams. And last but not least, we have Mazhar, who's a machine learning engineer, similarly working with Charaka on helping our teams in the specialization of the latest advancements in ML and AI. So thanks everyone for joining in. Before we get started, I think on the applications of GenAI for enterprises, I just wanted to go around the room and get a quick feel of how are you guys right now? I mean, GenAI now is maybe about 2 years old now. What are the latest things that you've been using that you found interesting that are contributing to your daily productivity or even outside of work, things that are just fun to use? Charaka, maybe we'll start with you.
Thanks, Adil. So from my side, I think coming from a bit of a technical background, I've been experimenting a lot with GenAI in the last few couple of months, actually. And I've been building these personal workflows, especially in terms of generating these UIs and product concepts just through GenAI. But something that I found super useful and something I use on a day-to-day basis is this using GenAI as sort of a tool for pair programming and debugging code. So that's a very big use case, and I think a lot of companies have been start to dive into it much deeper. But I've personally been using GenAI, and I think a lot of developers might have tried this, and there are, I think, shortcomings and there are good things and bad things of doing this. But some of the good things I would say is that you can develop things much faster, and the debugging time takes way less longer. But something to just keep in mind is when you're doing this, you got to be like play the role of an architect as opposed to sort of like expecting AI to do the whole thing. That's not what this pair programming is. It's kind of like a you work with the AI, kind of communicate your the context of your requirements, and context here is very crucial. As I guess we'll dive into this, we'll get to know that more. And yeah, play the role of an architect and sort of guide the Gen AI, work with it to develop the application. So,
I think
and I
that,
think, sorry, Adi,
sorry.
I just wanted to name drop a few tools in
Hmm.
case anyone was interested. Cursor AI is something that's very popular right now, and Ada is another tool that was initially developed, and it's still very good. But if anyone's interested in doing this, I would recommend you just have a look at Cursor and Ada.
I think it's crazy the level of knowledge that has been democratized now because of this, right? I mean, Cursor and I think things like Replit also. I was just watching a video the other day. Pretty much back end, front end, entire end-to-end solution looks like can be done with a few prompts now, which is a little scary, but also exciting, I think, for us to use those tools. Manisha, what about you? I mean, you're working in GenAI use cases on a day-to-day basis, in within work, outside of work. What are the tools that you're seeing that are interesting?
Yeah, yeah. So my current focus revolves around exploring how generative AI can drive innovation across industries. So I'm working on projects that leverage technologies like LLMs and foundation models. These models offer flexible, scalable solutions from models AI applications, and by fine tuning them through transfer learning, we can tailor them to fit specific industry needs. So, one of the areas I'm really excited about these days is synthetic data generation. So, specifically, I'm integrating these things to the leisure industry. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Fascinating stuff. And Mazhar, finally, I think I always see stuff that you're posting online on a lot of opinions on the latest cutting edge stuff. Anything you have to add here?
Definitely, Adil. Of course, tools like Cursor with Ada, like which just Sharaka mentioned, is really fascinating, and to like use those in our like daily developments. But as you said, for me, the whole part of Gen AI is keeping up to the phase of the development. Where it's necessarily making content behind it, so that I can contribute to the community as much as possible, so that it's easily anyone can like create the content and understand, make it more simplified manner, so that it's easily consumable by any even a student or very professionals and so on. So definitely making content around the latest technologies where my whole time goes on in terms of studying the materials and keeping up to
Mm.
date. But also Gen AI comes in to, where I can build my own tools to streamline these kind of works, where it's like easy for me to create content behind those and then keep up with my always like tedious other like tasks as well. So
Mm.
definitely keep up, you'll see more content. And yeah, sometimes might be the whole workload will be pulling up by generative AI model, not me, but still I will make sure to be very relevant. Yeah,
Fantastic.
it's
Yeah.
relevant. End of the day, I bring
Definitely,
my
definitely.
own piece of content in as well.
I think the range, the variety of answers, I mean, just within the four of us like it should goes to show, I think, why it's taken up at such big scale right now, right? Personally, I haven't used it for anything so significant, but I mean, one thing it didn't work for was trying to figure out who was going to win the elections over the past weekend. Unfortunately, whatever model was being referred there didn't quite work. But no, let's move on. I think a lot of people in the audience, what they're thinking about today is depending on the industry they're coming in. They can be in an industry like, I mean, marketing or creative focus, which are taking these up quite a bit. And they can be in industries which are little more traditional and a bit hesitant to just jump on the latest tech. Charaka, what do you think is the reason why people should pay attention to Gen AI? Why is this the significant advancement that everyone should consider adopting?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Maybe I'll start the question by kind of introducing like what Gen AI is to everyone, and then afterwards kind of go over like why it's gotten so popular right now, like
Mm,
what's driving this. So like Gen AI, I think most people think of it as somewhat of an all-solving mystery in terms of AI, right? But it's simply a class of AI that focuses on creating new content. You can put it simply as that. This class of AI is very different to what we've seen before, and that's kind of why it's driving a lot of the change and a lot of the adoption that we're seeing, especially on the user side rather than the businesses. It's kind of like you said, democratizing a lot of services. For example, things like art, where one would have to kind of draw a picture before. Now you could just go to a model like Midjourney, just type what you want, and through a prompt, you can get a concept of maybe a product or be it a UI design, right? So it gives that back to the people, right?
mm,
And unlike traditional AI, I think why it's kind of driving this change is because traditional AI was thought more in the lines of things like regression models and I would say random forest, so like machine learning and deep learning, right? We've been using them as tools for classification, prediction, but this Gen AI kind of takes that a step further, where we are able to train a model across a large data set and make it generalize and understand what fundamentally makes up this data. Like if it's a face, it has a nose, it has
mm,
eyes, it has a mouth, and kind of generate a new one based on this, right? So that fascinates a lot of people. Like create something from nothing, right? Um, and how this became popular, like if we look back at the history of Gen AI, we got to understand that this wasn't a technology that wasn't there. It was just there in a different flavor. So I think some of you might have heard this concept called GANs. that kind of started this discussion in terms of Gen AI space. So GAN stands for Generative Adversarial Network. Simply, you can think of it as having two models, two AI models, two, in this case, it's a neural network, but one model acts as a discriminator where if you have an art, a piece of art, it's kind of assessing the art and saying, okay, is this a real piece of art or is this a fake piece of art? And another would be sort of like a generator, where this generator class of AI kind of focuses on creating a type of art that would fool this discriminator, right? And that's been the line of thinking for this generative AI for some time. And
Mm.
most recently, we had this sort of discussion. I think it came from the paper Attention is All You Need, which is released in 2017. Very popular paper. If you haven't seen it, would recommend you have a look. And that's kind of what sparked this transformer models. And if anyone didn't know, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So it's the base
Mm.
of what drove this transformation. It like that particular paper brought in like a lot of new concepts like self-attention. I would think that's too much to dive in, and there's too much
Yeah, yeah.
detail to go in there. But yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question and gives you an idea.
Definitely, Charak. I think the thing that speaks out, that comes out most, I think from what you described, is that previously kind of conventional or traditional AI ML technology is trained on something historically, and that's what we use. Whereas now there's potential to generate completely new things, right? And that's what's very exciting. One of the things that I think most significantly, if probably most of the people in the audience, when you refer to Gen AI, what goes hand in hand is ChatGPT, right? And ChatGPT, obviously, an LLM. Mazar, I think most people like the intro into Gen AI is that, right? LLMs. For them to know kind of what are the key fundamentals about the LLMs that they should think about when they're starting to think about how to bring this into their enterprises. What do you think should be considered?
Yes, Adil. So based on like even Charaka mentioned that of course bringing the initial understanding of how these machine models evolved, over the time and how what is actually a LLM model, what's is going on underneath is some understanding we have to bring in forward initially when you come up with certain use cases with respect to Gen AI, right? You have to build that initial foundation of understanding just to get started itself or looking into integrating Gen AI to any of your specific part of your organization or enterprise. But when specifically as you spoke, LLMs is one of the key areas where it's when in the space of Gen AI is making really the big difference with respect to generating new textual content. So I would say like there we can actually stage it down to 6 stages where like initially like someone who wants to develop a system can get started with just sending in a question and answering it, right? So basically you ask what is the capital of Sri Lanka and just provides you the answer saying Sri Jayawardenepura. So it's basic like Q&A where you have the question and answering system. And then you can eventually build up into a chatbot where of course you're not just asking questions and replying but also understand the previous context of each question. Say for example your follow-up question is what is the best cuisine, so it kind of understands you are talking about Sri Lanka, so it will get that context and answer the next question as well. So understanding that short-term memory between conversations is what chatbots are for. But
Mm.
say you want to move into a space where you want to integrate these chatbots to your company's website or your customer, interactions, then you need to provide an external source of knowledge which will be used to answer questions related to your services or your products. Then you need to put in some long-term memory, which will be provided by a rack system, which we call is retrieval augmented generation, right? So then these kind of systems comes in, and then you also like say for example someone wants to book a ticket through your like chatbot or like your chatting system, or they want to like add the product to a cart or anything that which interacts with beyond the system itself. You can use function calling and tool calling where you kind
Mm.
of interact with the outside environment do some actions over that, right? So then that's the fourth stage, and then we go to the fifth stage where we kind of work with agents. So agents is the kind of like very non-topic or people who has been talking about for since 2020, beginning of 2023. But like agents, we primarily use under hood the same function calling and to calling for actions, but there is a reasoning component of it. So we as humans, when we take an action, we initially reason out, right? Say if I'm logging into the webinar, I kind of know I have to like, take the link, just click the link, I accept the webinar and then come inside and like, turn off on my mic. So there's a series of steps, but we initially reason out to take those series of steps, right? So similarly, a agent is where it takes a reason and action. So it's kind of a reasoning and action model where it kind of reasons out and use these tools which I spoke about to take actions. And finally, we'll be moving into operating systems driven by LLMs, which is a phase where every organization can lead to, where every single part of the system is handled by an LLM to make it efficient. So these are like kind of series of step an organization can look into, particularly for each use case, how they can transform it to a level where they need. But of course, everything builds upon the whatever the foundation knowledge which Sharka mentioned, understanding how these models work. So that is very much important to bring this technology in and transform your own enterprises. Thank you.
And I think, yeah, if you bring it back to why someone, I mean, we're talking to an audience of around 70 people here coming from different enterprises. I think what you've highlighted is this very modular kind of series of steps, right? Which people can get on this journey of bringing in an LLM or in general generative AI, right? So, and I think most enterprises right now, if you look in the industry, are in the stage between the chatbots and what you talked about of RAG and agents. That kind of little bit of advancement is coming in only now into the mainstream. Manisha, what would you say in terms of where you've seen this taken up successfully in the industry? Because I think despite how cool and sexy the technology is, if it doesn't address the key business problems, you're never going to be able to convince your senior stakeholder, right? Which is what I'm sure a lot of people on this call would be concerned about. Where have you seen this applied well in the industry?
Yeah, so like let's talk about in order to answer that question, let's talk about the leisure industry, leisure sector. So Gen AI comes in a way that, let's say, whenever we are booking a vacation, visiting a theme park, or watching a, let's say, new TV series, we all want things to be easy, smooth, and like tailored just for us, right? So that's exactly where generative AI comes in. So it's like it's already changing the way the leisure industry works specifically. Let, now, let me dive it in a high level how this transformation is happening. So when we are booking a vacation or planning a trip, so we all want things to be quick, easy, and tailored to our preferences. So this is exactly where generative AI is stepping and transforming the customer experience. So, as an example, there are tools like Kayaks. It's an AI-powered travel assistant. Masa already like touch upon these things, like for the in terms of the foundation and stuff. It's a jag. It's getting personalized recommendation for flights, hotels, and activities that perfectly match your styles and budget. It's like having a travel expert in your pocket. Like it's all driven by AI. And when you arrive at a hotel, it doesn't stop there. They take there's another tool called Hilton's Connie that also a AI driven chatbot that acts like a 24/7 assistant. It leads to happier guests and building loyalty. So which is crucial in such a competitive industry. So another scenario is streaming platforms like Netflix and Spotify use AI for personalized content recommendation. So whether it's creating unique playlist or suggesting movies that align with individual tastes, a particular existing applications is AI generated interactive storytelling Platforms like Netflix allows viewers to shape narratives in interactive models. Like you are not just watching, you are co-creating the experience. So I would say these are the few examples generative AI has revolutionized the leisure industry. So in general, Gen AI doing the heavy lifting and leaving more room for human innovation. That's the point
Mm.
here. Yeah.
I think what's highlighted is that hand in hand of for there's a customer experience, you have what the model is doing, but you're also needing that human input. I think the two things that probably come out the most there is hyper personalization, which I think across almost any industry that people are working in these days, the customer wants exactly what they want to see, right? And they want it fast. And GenAI can provide both those things, I think, from what you've highlighted, and facilitate that very easily. Uh, Given that, okay, we know that there are use cases that this is being done successfully in, if someone was to want to get started now, one of the biggest blockers I think seen in the AI ML space is this feeling or misconception that you need, I mean, a significant team. Like, I mean, for example, here at Octave, right, we have a team of data scientists, data engineers, people very qualified in the space to operate on these things. But if someone was going in without that significant, let's say, pool of talent or resources, can a company leverage Gen AI successfully even without that? Mazhar, what do you think? Is there, are there tools out there maybe, or are there ways that companies can transform their processes with Gen AI without needing to delve so deep into the space? Yeah.
Yes, that's a very good point. We can bring that in because organizations which doesn't have a team, okay, like traditionally when it comes to machine learning or deep learning models, which we need a large amount of data to bring into a certain level where we can use it and bring in certain efficiencies or bring in, like improve sales or reduce cost or like even improve certain processes, right? So, but these kind of models which we got from maybe OpenAI, maybe like Llama or like any of these has given the accessibility for anyone who can just pay it and get it out of the box, right? Has the ability to process information and give out certain kind of predictions, right? Text processing, text analyzing, classification. It's a bunch of operations there, right? Even coding. So this ability of these models being like open sourced and closed source where you can just easily access them and use it through an API. You don't even host them on a cloud, right? You can just calling an API.
Mm,
So that's that way you can any organization can build on top of that API and deliver certain set of services which they can have been done which with smaller teams, right? Just two
mm,
or three people in the team can do that level of services and build their own application. So that is one of the like key areas I see people can easily use. But of course, when organizations come in, they kind of ask, okay, why not we fine tune our own model on our data? So that's one of the key questions we and big enterprises ask. But of course, when it comes to LLMs, yes, we can get to that space, but it only makes sense by cost and R&D when you need have a like application which is that scale, which is used by multiple users every single day. And of course, it depends on the use case because all the integrity is there. But still, when it comes when there is scale, only you think, okay, using your own fine-tuned model makes more sense.
mm,
But an organization who, whether it's a startup or with even a like large enterprise, starting with these or closed sourced models or which are offered by OpenAI or certain cloud providers, and directly using those APIs and using it would be the wise choice to get started with Gen AI and eventually move to a space where we are saturated in terms of the understanding or in terms of the capabilities of the employees in bringing that posture of culture and innovation. And then you go into the space where you kind of bring in your own models fine tune on your data such a way that it brings you extra level. So you can actually reach around 70%, 80% of the applications with just these open source or closed source models. But when you like need to go into a 95 or 100 levels, then
Mm.
only you should look into these fine tune on your own data models and then use it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think yes. So I mean, at the beginning, kind of, we were talking about the what it is about the tech that's so interesting, and I think Manisha touched on how in the industries right now it's working, and you just brought up a point I think which can lead nicely into our next area that I personally want to discuss, which is how do we ensure this scales for those businesses, right? How do we foster, like you said, that culture of innovation across industries, no matter which sector people are coming from? And I think there's a stat about the 10-20-70 split, which is that 10% of the success is from the algorithms, 20% is from the technologies, and 70% is people and processes, right? Because at the end of the day, if that's the most significant part in terms of delivering success with a project. Charaka, from your own experience, can you speak to a little bit on how you've seen this culture of innovation fostered, and what recommendations you would have for someone if they're going to take up what Mazhar said, maybe of firstly looking at just using the tools that are out there before you start developing and fine-tuning models yourself. What are the kind of things that people should keep in mind when they're doing this?
Yeah, thanks, Al. That's actually a very good point. So a lot of it comes down to actually exactly as you said, fostering that culture of innovation that's crucial for the space of Gen AI. Like, I think most of you might have used tools, Gen AI tools, right? And how often do you see that these tools are renamed, a newer version comes out? So you started with ChatGPT 2. I think it's 2, and then after it's 3.5, sorry, 3, then 3.5, then
Yeah.
4, then 4.0, and most recently O 1, right? So like I would say the space changes so quickly, and this is just one organization. So you've got
Mm.
Meta, Llama. So the Meta's model is called Llama, and then Google's model is called Gemini. So each of them have their pros and cons, right? It's creating this environment that harbors innovation, and that comes down to having this, I would like to call it like a sandbox environment where you can sort of, it's a safe to fail place where you can try things out, you can see if it works, and of course it doesn't work all the time. So whatever learnings, you take that forward. And if you do that as a team, so if for example me and Mazhar work very closely, so Mazhar does some things and then he brings that to the table, and then I do certain things in terms of the R&D, and then we bring that to the table. So we have a look at it in terms of a holistic picture. So what tools work for us in this particular use case, what tools don't. And I think kind of having that culture of being able to fail quickly, and in, I would say, in a like safe environment where it's kind of your ability to fail is there, and but you also do fail fast because you don't want to take a long time to fail.
Mm.
um,
Mm.
and that brings me to my second point. I think having that feedback loop, right? When you talk about agile, there's always this thing that we need to be very close to our stakeholders and have them on board with our Gen AI use case. We're not developing it fast, we're developing it for a wider group. And it's very important to get their feedback, have their sort of say, and also set the expectations correctly. Gen AI can't do everything, and that's something that I'm sure most of us have experienced when we ask ChatGPT a question. That's, of course, it can't answer everything, right?
Mm.
So kind of setting the expectations correctly and having that feedback loop where we can go, yeah, like show, like if we're building something, we demonstrate that on maybe a bi-weekly or a sprint basis, and then kind of get the feedback of users and integrate that into the platform. Yeah.
I think, yeah, definitely one of the things, I mean, we are facing, I mean, I think we work commonly across multiple projects, right, is the expectation management. Now, once you're able to convince, the leadership that look, GenAI is the thing to do, they're expecting the world plus more, right? And the hardest part is this whole fail fast culture of being able to feel safe in that environment to experiment and see what works. And then that, again, like you said, agile, right? Constantly going back, constantly getting the feedback and refining. Manisha, based off of your experience, I think we worked on a project together where this process has happened, right? What would you do, like, in terms of like a rubric or let's say a Bible of steps what would you suggest if someone is facing that kind of pressure of, look, we need to tie this to revenue, we need to ensure we meet a deadline in an environment with Gen AI? How do we handle that kind of comment? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say this is the crucial part that we need to focus on. Like integrating generative AI into business operations is a significant transformation for any organization. So organizations should ensure that they have clear strategy, high quality data, the right technology, ethical framework, and a focus on employee training. These things, Charak and Maza already touch upon these some of these things. I'll give kind of clear steps that we need to like focus on. So the first step is to have a clear strategy in place. Generative AI isn't something you should implement just because it's trendy. It's need to align with your overall business goals. Organization must ask themselves, what problems are we trying to solve with AI? And best way to start with specific areas where AI can make an immediate impact. That is the better way. And then the next step is to data readiness. This AI thrives on data. So business needs to ensure that they have clean, well-organized data sets before jumping into implementation. So this includes conducting a data audit as well to understand the quality, security, and availability of the data you plan to feed into your AI systems. So, as you know, AI is only good as the data is learns from. So, yeah, once you have a strategy and your data is ready, it's time to choose the right technology. So, the AI landscape is vast, we know that, and with many tools and platforms available, whether you go for, let's say, cloud-based service or open source models, it's important to select tools that integrate seamlessly with your existing IT infrastructure. So you also need to consider scalability. Additionally, investing in platforms that offer like customization is crucial. So you can tailor AI solution to your specific business needs. As Charaka mentioned, we have like different kind of like GPT models likewise that should be customized. And one of the most critical steps is implementing strong ethical guidelines and governance. And finally, don't forget about people. So implementing generative AI will change how your employees work. So it's crucial to invest in training and change management. And you want to ensure that your team are not only comfortable using AI, but also empowered to leverage it effectively. So these are the main steps a business organization should take when integrating Gen AI, I'd say. Yeah.
I think both you and Charaka have highlighted, I mean, it's quite clear what needs to be kept in mind when looking at bringing this into your business, right? And the constant thing that's, I think, repeated is the one is having a very clear goal of what it is you want the Gen AI to do, because without that, I think it's very hard for, I mean, even for you guys, like as technical teams working on this project, if the business doesn't have a very clear goal, it's very hard to meet that expectation. And two, obviously what Charaka highlighted of failing fast and ensuring agile methods of feedback. But Manisha, your last point there on training the workforce, I think we can move now on to maybe talking about looking into the future, or rather what we should do ourselves to be ready for Gen AI, if we're taking it on for our own enterprises, and then maybe come to the limitations of that. Mazhar, I mean, I'll talk about a personal experience I have, because Charaka mentioned it before, which is the various models that are there, right? Like I was actually thinking about taking on, a little bit of software development and looking at the best model to use. There's like Anthropic, there's Meta, there's Google, there's so many things out there. What would you say, like, would someone need to first focus on any core skill sets before they're thinking about using GPTs? Any key critical, like, theoretical topics that they need to learn? What would you say is the most important thing someone would need to take away from this if they want to get into generative AI for their businesses? Yeah.
Yes, so when it comes to like how someone can, get into generative AI, like at least like, kind of, get into a space where you kind of bring that space. Uh, it's actually like, kind of what Charak also mentioned, it's kind of we have to try it out. You just, whatever the latest technology comes in, you kind of try to put your hands on there and, fail. Like, you should be ready to, fail, just basically like put your hands there and like try to do something and fail and learn over the journey. But one of the crucial aspects when I'm working with people, I understand, like how, talk to people about generative AI. One of the key misconceptions I see as like people think generative AI is similar to other machine learning and deep learning models, even though they evolved from that space, but the working principles on how they work and how they generate content is totally different, right? Actually, you don't like, say for example, you also need to understand how these models work, but underlyingly these models are next to it predictors, right? It's
Hmm.
basically predicting and next to it. And people often complain saying, these models are hallucinating a lot, and like, it bringing out something really relevant, but still, those this hallucination is what brings the creativity within the LLM as well. So there's a like very nice quote saying, hallucination is a bug as well as a feature. So that's a feature, but it also is a bug when it comes to the context you are in using that. So understanding these key elements, yeah, how these generative AI models work and why certain things are in certain ways, and like, why hallucination is a bug and as a feature, and understanding this kind of nuances and how they work differently from the traditional machine learning models is where you can get started. So in terms of where it's heading towards, I can maybe speak a bit on that. So it's heading towards where we also spoke about agents, right? So we spoke about agents specifically as a fourth point in one of my previous conversations. Uh, where these agents kind of use states and tools and then large memory. It's kind of where all the components are coming together, and it's like human being accessible to multiple tools and information is able to take actions on that.
Hmm.
So, and also it's going towards a paradigm where it's there we use multiple agents, right? So when there's say if there's a human, we have to do multiple tasks, so we can't specialize into one task. So we have to do multiple tasks. It's really hard for us to specialize. So you kind of build multiple agents where you can specialize on each of these tasks much better. And so that way, like, we kind of understand and we can control each of the persons and to focus on one thing, and also put out communicate between these people in a very good manner, so that the whole team works as a kind of towards one end goal. So those is where it's kind of going towards where we're building multi-agent workflows, where we kind of have a workflow being streamlined, where each of these work together to achieve a single output task. And then we are moving towards like reasonings. And so we have actually like this, well, this is very spoken by if you have attended or listened to a recent interview by Sam Altman, like the author of achieving AGI, right? So he talks about 5 stages there. So the first stage is where what we got as ChatGPT, which is chatbots. So basically answering key questions. But he also talks about now what the new model, which Sharak also mentioned in the previous conversation, saying O1 preview. So they
Hmm.
are called as reasoners. So we are in the second stage now. We have reasoners. Actually, we have this intrinsic feature which you can build as organizations, but what you get from out of the box from the OpenAI itself is what we O1 is, right? So we also have O1 which can reason and then take actions. And then you will have, so then you will have agents which are out of the box given by these companies, which we can use it out of the box and build our own, give them our tools and use them for our own workflows. And then it will be kind of going towards LLM, like specialized agents or LLM like innovators, where you kind of you give them the data, you give them the access to the data, and they just kind of identify certain issues, and then they take actions on their own. So it's kind of innovating based on the data. And then finally it's using AGI. So this, we
Mm,
are in the second stage of this whole generative AI paradigm, where we see reasoners are coming out. And based on his statement, he has mentioned that the path time it may take to reach agents, where it will see we will see more much more applications will be less. So yeah, I think it's a nice space for you to look out for and see what are the developments happening. But of course, as we mentioned, even Charaka, and it might, whatever the developments we do might become very irrelevant 3 months or 6 months down the line. So
mm,
it's important that you bring those technology in, try to work with them, fail fast, and try to develop. And even like when I'm speaking to one of our consultant, Octave Opul, he often mentions that whatever we built 6 months before is not relevant today. So you always, even when communicating stakeholders or people, you communicate that okay, this is going to be something we are going to build for the phase one, but phase two going to be developed because the technologies keep on evolving. So I leave it to the people's curiosity to learn towards it, be open, and guess, just put your hands into it and get yourself ability to work with that.
mm. I think it's interesting with the way you put it is it seems like, I mean, there's an abundance of things online and it's ever changing. So it's mainly about the mentality that you foster, right? And just being keen on reading, on learning about all these things, because there's no certification, there's no guaranteed
Mm.
one-stop solution in this field that people might be comfortable in the traditional fields that they come from. So it's a constant iteration and building of that skill set that is needed. Mm. Cool.
True,
I think,
exactly.
I mean, yeah, we've touched a lot on, I think, the positives and how we bring it to our industries and enterprises. Something that I'm sure the audience are thinking of now is, okay, I want to go convince my stakeholders, but I have to also consider the limitations. I have to consider the risks, right? And what are the possible things that I need to account for when we are bringing these solutions to businesses. Charaka, from your point of view, what are you seeing and dealing with on a day-to-day basis, that sorry, Mazhar, just before we start, you had your hand up?
Yeah, if the like audience have any questions, they can add to the
Oh, yes,
chat.
absolutely.
Just
Thanks for that. Yes, yes, absolutely. Anyone with any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat and we'll take them as we go in the discussion. But yeah, Charaka, coming back to you, what are you seeing right now that people should keep in mind when they're thinking about bringing Gen AI in terms of things like, obviously, ethics is a big one, and also like technical limitations that you see right now that people should be aware of?
Sure thing, Adil. Yeah, that's a very good question, especially when you look to sort of bring these use cases to life. Like it's nice having something on your computer and your laptop, but then actually having it to a scale where people can actually use it. That's the real challenge with these Gen AI projects. But like firstly, before diving into that, I'd like to like add something about what Mazhar was talking about, especially with where AI is right now, right? So a lot of companies go about this by thinking about Gen AI and then kind of just jumping on it without thinking like deeply about how it can affect and how it can be implemented on some of the deeper business problems, right? So a lot of the solutions you see in these marketplaces and especially use cases would be wrappers, where there's simply a wrapper around ChatGPT or and maybe another large language model. And I would think that that's not the approach that a lot of you'd want to take, and it's more of kind of leveraging these technologies on a deeper level and building it into a workflow. And yeah, that brings us to like how do we sort of bring these workflows to life? And some of the problems of doing that is productionalization of these models are challenging, right? So you can build these solutions and you can try them out, but then you're building it in a controlled environment. Keeping in mind something that Mazhar was talking about, like these models are probabilistic in nature. Like the next word is not guaranteed. So if you think of it in, if I say hello, then maybe it says something else after that, or and tomorrow when you ask it again, it changes, right? Um, So that fundamentally brings a lot of challenges when productionalizing, because it's not deterministic, it's probabilistic. So the output you get is probabilistic as well. And it leads into like a lot of challenges. So some mitigation things you can do is immediately do guardrails, have prompt guardrails, and sort of build those mechanisms in where you can like uh, building like regex patterns and yeah, and so on. But that leads me to the second problem, which is something Mazhar touched on as well, the hallucination, right? These models hallucinate. So if anyone's curious what hallucination means, is basically these models sort of make up information that somewhat didn't exist, like and is not true. And they are very if you have a conversation with them, they are very adamant that it is true. So it's a funny place to be. But Yeah, so kind of building in these quality controls and keeping in mind that sometimes, like, how do we incorporate these generative AI models into spaces where the information that is required needs to be of high quality? Maybe it's a financial data set where you're sort of asking information on, okay, like I need to know how much outstanding debtors I have, right? Like if you ask a question like that, and it gives you an incorrect information, that puts a lot of risk. So it's very
Hmm.
like it's very, very important to keep those factors in mind. And one thing you touched on actually, Adil, that I'd like to also incorporate is ethics, right? Biases and ethics. So it's very important to keep in mind that the the biases are sort of incorporated into these models based on the training data. So that's kind of somewhat a black box to us where we aren't able to look into that. Some of the models, they kind of do make that visible. They do make that transparent that these are the training data sets that they have, but a lot of models don't. So these biases we can't see, and somewhat they do come through in the outputs of these models. And Again, especially when you're talking about training data, it's ethics. Where is this coming from? Where is this these ethical considerations? And a very recent, I think, uh, I would say, interesting ethics consideration was when Adobe had included into their terms of service that um, artworks generated by creatives, for example, if I was using Adobe, is now accessible to them. So if you upload something on the Creative Cloud, now they are able to use that artwork to train their generative AI models. It kind of
Hmm.
makes it very questionable in terms of, as a creative, if I would want
Yeah.
my designs, my art to kind of be given out to be trained on for a Gen AI model, right? Like, I'm not sure if a lot of people would want that, and that's the discussions we're having right now.
That raises a lot of questions, right? I mean, is anything that a Gen AI model creates, can it really be original? I mean, it's trained on, human art, and then there's also, that's a very obviously controversial topic. But yeah, it's interesting that you highlight that, and that's definitely something people should keep in mind, particularly if they are in industries where kind of the human element is very weighty and very considerable. This has to be handled quite sensitively then. Yeah, that's uh, that's true. Charak, actually, just back to you. You mentioned one thing about accuracy, and how you can't predict if what the model is going to say next. Are there standard things in right now, like people can look at implementing in terms of measuring that accuracy? Because I'm sure that's something they have is uh, how can I know that my model is accurate? Are there frameworks that you come across that you implement right now to test out model accuracy?
Right. So actually, Adil, here it's a bit challenging, but something that we do is we look to increase the model accuracy by giving it more context. So,
Hmm.
like, especially if you can think of these Gen AI models having an understanding that they know nothing about your business. If I was to put it simply, it's that, right?
Hmm.
And what you want the model to do, right? So you got to be very specific, and the more context you give, the better the quality of the output. And that's fundamentally what it comes down to. Like, even if you're using, it doesn't have to be on like a production use case or anything. If you're just simply interacting with ChatGPT or be it a different LLM model, like if you give it more context, the quality of output will increase. Something to answer your question, certain frameworks that we've been building, it really depends on what the expected output would be. So, say the output was a financial number, like say I was making the model write a query and then running that query on a database. So there's different parameters that we can quality test. For example, is this query valid? The query that's been generated, is the financial, like the query output correct? So these sort of metrics kind of depend on the particular use case,
Hmm.
but we're able to sort of measure them somewhat, right? But like things like, for example, a quality of a passage, like if you ask it to generate a caption for my Instagram, right? You might not be able to get a direct measure of quality, but
Yeah.
what you could do is pass on some context, like, okay, I want these kind of these things, and that would improve the quality of the output. Hope that
Right.
answered your question, Anand.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I think it's very illustrative of different ways to go about it. But yeah, and then if we, I think your second half, you were touching on the ethical side of what needs to be considered, and I think we have a question from Mohammed as well in general about, I think, what should be focused on when thinking about how to contribute to GenAI developments, and I think ensuring ethical implementation. I think the key thing there would be probably in terms of actually understanding exactly what goes on in the model, so that you can really speak to the the downsides or what you should be aware of. And there is a concern with GenAI, as with any new technology, that it's a black box, right? And Manisha, from your point of view, how do you tackle that problem? Like for someone like I think Mohammed, who's asked the question of it, how would you tackle um, explaining this black box to people who might not be from a technical background? Yeah.
Yeah, so this explains part of the Muhammad's question. So, like, apart from data privacy concerns like bias and accountability, which Charak explained and like covered, one of another key black box problem is in generative AI is in like I would say ensuring transparency and explainability, and ensuring like transparency and explainability is not just an ethical guideline but a technical necessity. So,
Hmm.
like in simple terms, transparency means that organization needs to be open about how their AI systems work. To achieve this, organizations need to like document and disclose the specific um, there should be training data set that they have used, and they need to provide the insight to model architecture. It might be LLMs, GANs, or diffusion models likewise, and explain the key hyperparameters also. So that influence the model's behavior, the hyperparameters. So it's important that people understands how the system arrives at its output. And on the other hand, explainability is about making sure users can understand the decisions AI is making. So, for example, if an AI system suggests a specific hotel or vacation package to a customer, let's say, so it's not enough for the AI to just provide the suggestion. So it should also explain why it made that recommendation. So maybe it's based on past preferences or recent searches, likewise. So by
Hmm.
doing this, companies help users feel more confident about trusting the AI because they understand how it reached that decision. So that is crucial.
Hmm. And I think, like what linking it back to Charaka talking about giving the model more context, the more and more
Hmm.
context you give it essentially to understand what you as a human understands, the more clear its chain of thought or reasoning can be. And then
Yeah.
that obviously gives a lot of confidence to the stakeholders using it, right? And removes the black box element out of it. Yeah. Interesting. I'll just give a quick reminder to everyone on the chat to please enter in your questions, as we're coming to the last 10 or so minutes of the panel. But yeah, and if I can just move, then actually one of the themes that keeps coming up is the constant advancements and having to be at the cutting edge. And Mazhar, we were talking about before, I think you were mentioning on RAGs, but now what I understand is, I mean, there's advancement in the field now with these large context LLMs coming in, where is and for people who don't quite understand, would you be able to explain why or how we might not even need RAGs, and what is the significance of that? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, actually, like when it comes to even Charaka and Manisha just speak about context a lot. Like the word context popped up like few or like many couple of times. Rag is of course we use for the context, right? So for example, I'll talk why initially, like why was this rag needed? Okay, so initially when LLM models were released, they were had a like input limitations of 8K, 16K token limits. So tokens are like, for example, you can say 1,000 tokens is 750 words. So you kind of have these input token limitations where you can't put in uh, put in words which are you can't fit in with those like in number of tokens. So you can't put in document hundreds of documents into it, right? So for some organization or some use case which we need to process large amount of text, we are unable to process them at one moment, or to provide certain context. Say, for example, I'm asking a question regarding a certain service of my business. How do I identify what's the relevant context for this question to be answered, right? Say someone is asking a question regarding Octave, which is not primarily available over the internet. So how can we answer that question? We should be an employee of Octave or someone who inside
Mm.
Octave to ability to have that information to answer that specific question, right? So similarly, these I would consider any LLM out of the box is like a general human who doesn't have a domain expertise. He is a general human who knows to read, understand, make calculations. That's it, right? But if for it to like work on specific domain or specific area in much more better way, it's need to have this context. So since contexts were limited by the token limit, we need a track where it kind of understand what's the question is asked by the user, kind of retrieves the similar context which is needed to answer that question, and then pulls in and then answers the question. But now, given the development, as you said, where we have large models like Gemini 1.5, which has a 2 million length content, right? 2 million length token limit, which is really, really huge when you compare to the 8K or 16K we initially had. So
Mm.
this brings a very big question among industries or like professionals whether RAG is relevant come going forward. Because
And Mazat,
when
sorry if I
the
just interrupt you there,
yes.
this 2 million limit, is this going to be wide scale? Like, are these going to be the common mainstream LLMs that, us normal users would be able to use? And
So the like Gemini, what you see in like when you access your Microsoft browser, you
mm,
see the like models there, right? So those are basically Gemini models. But of course, like not how I'm not sure how Microsoft would whether will be able to give it out to general users. But still, we have this current Gemini model. I think it's kind of comparatively larger
mm,
to ChatGPT in terms of the token limit. So given that you have this larger context, like because when the LLMs when came in, people like all organizations were implementing RAG pipelines. They were heavily invested in RAG pipelines because it's not something you can do it within like a week or two, which needs to do like over like it has been have to develop over time. A lot of R&D has been going on into RAG for a long time. So this kind of brings a heavy question on like industries and enterprises on whether to invest more into RAG and building sophisticated RAG pipelines. I would say like even though say for example we have 2 million, even if you are using ChatGPT when you're using or even like using basic LLM models, they kind of understand or kind of get the context of the recent line or recent context you provide. Say you're providing 100 pages of document, it kind of understands the last single document much more relevant and kind of answer the questions much more prefer to the least content like recent content you have provided. So it's kind of the effectiveness LLM kind of gets reduced based on the very past context. So the recent context is what makes LLMs much more relevant. So even when we are putting in certain prompt guardrails, I think Charga can relate to that, where we kind of put certain guardrails near the answering question itself, where the context is very near to the LLM, very recent, rather than it's very far from the LLM's question answering. So it's kind of like effectiveness of LLM, even though we have 2 million, but still the effectiveness can be really, really low compared to the 2 million. And also the cost, right? So you are being you are being charged for the number of tokens you process through the LLM. So if you are like even processing 1,000, like for example, the recent GPT-4o model, which is one of the cheapest model, which would cost you $15 for 1 million token like processing, just the input. Output itself is 15. So it's kind of, it's really costly when you want to process a large amount of text. So 2 million itself is also will be very costly for a person or for an organization to bear that level of information, like context to be data to be processed or tokens to be processed, right? So that way it also doesn't make sense in a like bigger picture to rely on this mechanism of large context length LLMs. But also we see situations where we talk about prompt caching. We kind of that's also some interesting area people can look into, where it also provides a certain advantage over RAG. That is something very interesting in this space, which I can talk a lot, but I don't want to deep dive.
No, I think
But
yeah.
of course, people can understand.
Yeah, I think what the from what you're saying, there's already so many alternative ways to go about it within this space, isn't it? And with the emergence of
Yes.
newer things, it'll continue to change. Yeah, and but this is quite significant, right? It's a that's why we're calling attention to it. Is these large context LLMs obviously might change the game for people who won't need to introduce more technical elements. They can straight away just do it with the built-in model itself. Yeah. I think
Exactly.
Niza had a very good question. Thanks, Niza, which was on, if I was to summarize, I think he was looking at I think a common use case, right, of using an LLM to process call transcripts. And maybe I'll open it up to everyone, but maybe Charaka, you can go first. What do you look for in terms of like the KPIs or evaluating how to implement an LLM into a project like that? I think he's talking about key things to consider, like retraining, how to evaluate, etc. But yeah, what are those key components? Maybe you can map out for Niza, from your experience, what he should do from like an end-to-end solution point of view. Yeah.
I think, Adil, it's very important there to kind of understand where LLM exactly fits in. So, for example, like I would just take this case. I'm not exactly sure of the specific use case here, but I'm just assuming, say, for example, it's like you have a call transcript, then you want to summarize a call. Maybe it might be like per specific user. You might have like, for example, this call, right? Like, what did Adil say? What did I say? What did Mazhar say? So, like, if we have that sort of discussion, I would break that down and then sort of look at, okay, first we have to have a text to speech model. Sorry, speech to text model, right? So we convert our speech on the call to a text, right? Then for example, we would use an LLM there to maybe summarize the call. Um, and here, the quality of the summary, it's kind of, again, here it's kind of like an iterative basis where, like as Maza said, you have a variety of models. How do you summarize it in a way that the quality of the output is exactly what you want, right? So again, it comes down to context. So giving it context, you can add different flavors of context. You can make it maybe specific. So things like RAG is a quick method that could use to add more context to that summarization. So like it come like if I was to say an example, it would be like few shot, right? So it's called few shot, where given this is the summary I want, these are examples of summaries I've generated before, and this is the kind of structure, the length I want for my output as well. And you might use a RAG model to do this. You might provide this as like as part of the prompt, like a system prompt. And finally, the quality of output, how you could sort of assess that is on a summary like that, you sort of have to look through and read through it and figure out, okay, is this what I want? And you can, to kind of align yourself more and more to higher quality, is you have to kind of experiment with these different models. So one could be a llama model, one could be ChatGPT 4o, maybe o1, right? But then keeping in mind that there's a trade-off. Like the more complex the model, the more expensive it is. So keeping in mind those factors, you have to kind of experiment. Yeah, I think I hope that answers the question. Maybe I can open it up to
Yeah, I can.
Maza or
Yeah, I can
Manisha.
add it up, add some context over like what Chark has mentioned. Of course, when it comes to LLMs, there are like benchmarks, right? You of course they like when they release itself, they kind of benchmark over certain types of task. So how are they good in mathematics tasks? How are they good in coding? So how like even we have heard a lot like Cloud 3.5, which is from Anthropic, is one of the best coding models, right? So you can actually like look into those benchmarks and understand how are they performant in each of these tasks. Like for example, which is a good LLM model is very specific on what task you're talking about, right? So one of the like chat I have just mentioned in the chat saying that LMSYS chatbot arena. So it's like
Mm,
it's hosted in the Hugging Face where people kind of do certain tasks and they kind of vote saying this model is better on this. So it's kind of it's not something given by out by the certain companies on the LLM models. It's kind of a chat like voting system where people come and vote saying, I preferred this specific LLM for this task. It was good, right? But it's also very specific. For example, certain models which are very good in code generation for Python won't be good for SQL. So it's basically like what amount of coding data the company has been used to train these LLMs. So that is why this bilingual nature, like multilinguality, all this comes in. So how much is data is used to train this model is what the specific task it will get better at, right? So if they are using for coding Python more, then it will be better at Python. But some models will be better at Python and some models will be better at SQL. So it's kind of
mm,
differentiates from models to models, where we kind of use these kind of benchmarks and we kind of use this kind of online chatbot arena like platforms where you go and like see how they are doing best, right? So and moving to the second question which Nizar just mentioned, whether for like to classify some data, classify a content like amount
yeah,
of
what should
text,
be?
whether using RAG or fine tune is better. It's actually like people like kind of compare RAG as like fine tuning as one to one. Like the RAG serves a different purpose and fine tuning serves a different purpose. So actually, you can even put few short examples as RAG, and then you kind of do a similarity and use them, and then kind of do it. So that's one purpose. But fine tuning is something would bring you better results, but it's more costly. It's something you can't do it update often. So you fine tune when you got it, but you want to make a change, you can't do that very easily. You might, but if it is a RAG pipeline, you can bring that development much more faster. So it's kind of very specific on what's the problem you're trying to solve. And if it is something you will be changing over the time, or all this needs to be put in like forward to understand whether we need to take this approach or this.
Absolutely. I think a lot of basically what I'm getting from the answer is a lot of evaluation needs to be done on the context and kind of the complexity needed to then decide, right? Because RAG seems to be a lot more modular, and if you need to be making more changes more consistently, that would definitely be the option to go with. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Adil, if I could just add to what
Yeah.
Maza said very quickly. That's a very good question. And I think like I have a bit of a bias towards using RAG over something like model fine tuning, as Maza just pointed out. It's mainly because I believe personally, and I've through my experience of using model fine tuning, model fine tuning works a lot better when you're trying to, for example, introduce a new structure. For example, like you're trying to train a model to understand this is what a JSON file looks like. This is what maybe like a Python script looks like, and introducing structure to your code. But as soon as you want to incorporate certain elements like classification and extraction, summarization, um, as Mazhar just correctly said, like I personally believe that like the approach of using RAG works a lot better, and I've seen those results. But again, this is more experimentation, so you have to try and try. And but from my experience, and I've tried this quite a bit, um, a RAG approach for classification is very much the way I would choose going into looking at it. And
Mm,
something to add there is you have to be very specific because this is a classification case that use the correct model because it's simply classification. You don't want to use something like O1 preview, just throwing. It's like using a Ferrari but having a very poor road, right? Like that might not be the exact the reference there, but
exactly.
it's you get the point. It's
It's
use
good.
the right tool for that and a simpler model. Maybe it's 4.0, maybe it's even 3.5, even lower.
Mm,
You could probably achieve the best, a better result or the same result.
mm, mm. Thanks. Thanks, Charaka. Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely what's coming out is, I mean, there's so many different ways and so much people, I think so much that needs to be understood before you take these decisions. But it's an environment that people should dive into and start learning about for sure. I think we're coming to the winding up stages, and I think we've covered kind of four key areas, right? We went over um, uh, what Gen AI is and why it's so important, why people in the audience should pay attention to it now. And then I think Manisha, you spoke about some examples in the industry, and we moved into how one should take up and scale up Gen AI for themselves, and then finally also on the limitations and the risks. But coming to the closing of today's panel, if and I'll pose this question to each of you, if there was one thing, one resource that you would point to for someone to go and access post this call to ensure that they're, furthering their knowledge and looking at bringing Gen AI forward for them and their businesses, what would it be? Manisha, maybe we'll start with you. One, I'm only limiting you. I'm keeping it to only one. I'm sure there's many that you guys will want to talk about, but just top of mind, what would be the best?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so uh, if I had to, so the in order to grow the skills in generative AI, it's there's a Coursera course for Andrew Ng. Like he has the deep learning specialization, and it's specifically tailored with updated focus on generative AI. So that is really good course that you need if you need to like learn more on generative AI, because specifically this resource covers the foundation concepts of deep learning while delving into advanced techniques such as transformers models, GANs, and diffusion models. And with the combination of theories and hands-on experiences, so I would say it's perfect balance of foundational knowledge and cutting-edge techniques. Yeah, that's a good course that you need
Sure,
to
sure.
take.
I think he has quite a few courses on
Yeah.
ML AI and massive
Mm.
advance into the Gen AI space as well.
Yeah.
Mazhar, coming to you, other than
Yeah.
following you on socials, which definitely everyone should do to find out what would you recommend?
Yeah, like for me, what works out is following people who work in the space, and create content behind that, because this technology is very, rapid. So you can't expect, someone to create a structured format for you to go and like, consume that, or at least pop up in your masters, or, your lecturer might learn it
Mm,
and come and teach you. You can expect that level of structure to come in, right? So it's you have to go and grab that knowledge where we kind of certain people kind of as Adi mentioned, like create content while you work on it, and you can eventually come and consume and then understand, then personal takes on that, and then kind of apply and see while you're working on them, and try to develop your own intuitions behind LLM. Like Charka mentioned, right? He has seen that tracks have been working better for classification tasks rather than fine tuning for this kind of specific purpose, right? It might change over time, but still, like you have to develop your own kind of intuitions behind how these LLMs works based on your experience, which some people have might agree with and not. So I would say, in short, one thing is you kind of following with the community, keeping up to date with other co work like people who is working in this domain through LinkedIn and or YouTube. Some people even create content on YouTube which are very
mm.
better than like many organizations. So yeah, that could be my take.
Thanks, Mazhar. And finally, Charka, coming to you.
Yeah, thanks, Adil. So As Mazhar also said, I think yeah, YouTube is a extremely good resource. Only thing is, as he also said again, like it goes so fast that the space evolves so quickly that things that I can't even recommend you a video or a course. It's just by the time you watch it, it's probably outdated. Like the
Some
space
of the
moves so
things that
fast.
we've said in this panel might be outdated by the time we get done with this discussion.
Exactly,
Yeah.
there might be a
Sorry.
new GPT model. Yeah,
Exactly.
so it comes down to that, right? I feel like it's understanding the fundamentals, like it's the core. So you don't have to go far, understand each and every model, sort of just understanding, okay, this is how it works, this is what it is. That's what's most important. But on top
Mm,
of that, if I was to recommend some resources, I would tell you try it, right? Like if you haven't, like go experiment and then sort of incorporate, yeah, like watch YouTube, incorporate that workflow and kind of build it into what you do. So for example, something that if I was to name drop a tool that I use very frequently, Mid Journey. I don't know if a lot of people have experimented with that. It's a really, really good tool for just prompting and then afterwards getting back an image. So I can just say I want an image of a cat, a hyper resolution image. I can even say that I want it to be, if you're into cameras and stuff, I can kind of tell it the ISO, the focal length and everything, and I can kind of put that down in text and it'll give me an image recreating that, right?
yeah.
So it's just incorporating this into your personal workflow by trying it out. And if there are any developers there, I know you said only one
Yeah.
one resource, but just something to add. I would say that documentation, go through it, like kind of reading through documentation. And if I was to name a library to use, LangChain is a good start. Like it allows you to build these workflows in and sort of combine that with things like Hugging Face, which is a library of open source models. So you can do things like if you were to build an app that like connects to your Instagram account, converts an image into like understands an image, so you can upload an image, use an open source model, caption that image automatically based on your previous Instagram posts. So things
Mm.
like that, right? They can do that completely using open source models. You don't have to do that with any paid models. So yeah, LangChain is definitely a good library to experiment with.
Thanks, Shark. I think for the audience, you heard it from the panelists themselves, which is to get your hands dirty, right? Whether it's a course or a YouTube video, following people online, or just going and experimenting yourself, it's try it out. And personally, my my suggestion would be to get in contact with you guys because over this past hour and a bit, just this short time, you've been able to expel so much information. I'm sure if anyone wants to know anything further, please reach out to these guys on LinkedIn. Socials will be posted below if you have any other questions as well. I think with that, I'd like to thank each of you all. Thanks, Charka, Mazhar, and Manisha, for your time today. Thank you to everyone in the audience for staying through the call and for the questions. And like I mentioned, please follow the Octave page on LinkedIn to check us out and see when our next webinar is. And hope to stay in touch and see you guys soon. All right. With that, thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
You.
guys.